Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is Aaron Hilliard. Welcome to Mushroom Wonderland. On this channel, we learn all about wild mushrooms. I'm the vice president of the Kitsap Peninsula Mycological Society. I'm a mushroom educator, and I give talks and make videos all about mushroom education. If you're brand new to the world of fungi, or maybe you have just taken an interest in wild mushrooms because you've been noticing them growing everywhere, well, this video is for you to help understand what you're looking at. So today we're going to head out into the trails of Washington State. This is a beautiful mixed conifer forest, meaning there's a lot of big evergreen trees out here, and there's a lot of mushrooms that grow only in symbiosis with these kind of trees. These are known as mycorrhizal mushrooms. The other type of main mushroom that we'll encounter is called a saprotrophic mushroom, and these mushrooms live solely on decaying matter, and they don't have a host plant or tree. Today we're going to explore these different types of mushrooms. I'm going to show you some of the identifying features of the mushrooms that we encounter along the way, and help to explain whether they're edible or poisonous. So thank you for joining me on this episode of Mushroom Wonderland.
Welcome to Mushroom Wonderland.
All right, growing right here on the side of this really main trail are these three beautiful yellowish colored mushrooms. One of the first things that I notice is there's a lot of dangly stuff hanging off the edge of the cap, and there's all this really dangly stuff hanging off the stipe. So these mushrooms are a saprotrophic mushroom, and you can't really tell just by looking at them whether they associate with the tree or they eat decaying matter. But these ones eat decaying matter, and they're free roaming, so they're not attached to any kind of a tree. You don't need a specific kind of forest to find these mushrooms, although they do seem to prefer a forest like this where there's going to be a lot of needle duff and leaf duff and a lot of natural foliage that a conifer forest here in the Pacific Northwest would have. These ones, Staria Ambigua, related to the wine cap mushroom, but these ones are not a popular edible. And as I pick one of those, you can see all of the appendages hanging off the edge of the cap. We call that an appendiculate margin. And if you look right in here, there is the remnants of the partial veil. So this would be called the annulus, or the ring on the stem. But in fungal terms, we call this the stipe. So look at all this cool little material, this little tissue hanging on the edge of the cap. That was attached to right there, covering the gills while the spores became mature. So these ones are going to have a dark purple-brown spore print and kind of a grayish colored gill when they start to get more mature. There just isn't a lot of reported information about the edibility of these mushrooms. If these were poisonous at all, we would probably know about it because those kind of things tend to be reported and recorded. Also, likewise, if they were a good edible mushroom, we would definitely know about that because people love to eat mushrooms. So the Staria Ambigua, this one, the ambiguous Staria, personally, I would just leave these ones alone just because there's so little information really known about edibility of them. Although I don't think they're toxic, and I also don't think they're a good edible mushroom. They sure are pretty, and they can pop up in a variety of different habitats. This time they're growing right alongside the trail for everybody to admire. So if you encounter these mushrooms, just know that these are Staria Ambigua. So let's keep going down the trail. Right here we see some beautiful mushrooms growing right on the side of the trail. These ones are very purple colored with a really white stem, white gills underneath there. So gills are these paper-like structures under here. You see that? These are known as a brittle gill because you see how easily they break and flake apart. Another interesting feature of Russa mushrooms, this is in the genus Russa, is that it breaks like chalk. You see that? Most mushrooms will kind of bend and string off, but the Russa very brittle. Their cell structure is kind of like styrofoam, so they really break apart very easily. Right now I'm just putting billions of spores out into the environment, so it's not harmful what I'm doing here to this particular mushroom to show you the features. This one will also get a little bit of blushing on the stem right here, which means it'll turn a little bit of a rosy color on that beautiful stark white stem. And if you put this on a piece of paper or a mirror and took a spore print, it would be a creamy white spore print. So Russa, pretty big genus of mushrooms, over 200 described species here in Washington State alone, but some of these are decent edibles. So the really purple one with the white stem is often called the shrimp Russa or the shrimp mushroom. And one way with this genus only of mushrooms, the Russalas, so first check that the stem will break like chalk. But after that, you can take a little nibble off the edge of the cap and just chew it on the tip of your tongue for about 5 to 10 seconds. And if it's one of the quote-unquote toxic ones, it's going to have a spicy feeling on the tip of your tongue. And if it's mild and you don't feel any spiciness, that means it's a totally edible Russa. So I'm going to try a little nibble of this to see if it's a mild or a spicy one. And don't worry, the spiciness, it doesn't last very long. It's just kind of right on the tip of your tongue. So don't take too big of a bite, but don't be afraid to try this, especially with the Russalas. So just as I suspected, this one, excuse me. So just as I suspected, this one is really mild. It's got a little bit of a fishy smell. This one is Russula xerampelina, or the shrimp mushroom. Some people call it the shrimp Russula or the shrimp mushroom. There's a couple of different mushrooms that go by the common name shrimp. So it's important to know scientific names too. It's nice to be able to say, I'm going to pick shrimp Russalas. I've heard of a guy who slices these up. You saute them with some garlic and a bunch of onions and put in beef stock, and it's like French onion soup, really, really rich fungal flavor. And these are delicious and really common, easy to find, growing right on the side of the trail. So the shrimp Russa, these ones really, really good for beginners. And go ahead and try them and make some food out of them. Completely edible mushroom, and a good one that's easy to identify. Also fun to throw against a tree and watch explode if you decide not to eat the ones that you pick. You know, one of the reasons that I've always loved wild mushrooms is just because of the mystery of them, the magical factor of mushrooms. They seem to just kind of pop up wherever they want, and as soon as they pop up, they can disappear. Mushrooms are not permanent, and they're certainly not like plants. Some years you can run into a species of mushroom and they'll be growing everywhere, and then you might not see them for a couple of years again. So there's a certain mystery to them. Even the people who study mushrooms the most still find it intriguing to go out mushroom hunting, because you often run into mushrooms that you just don't expect to be there. Mycology is the study of mushrooms, and it's an ever-growing and ever-expanding science, which just leads to so much mystery, so much to be discovered, and we need more people out there who are studying mushrooms, uploading them onto iNaturalist.org. We need people out here taste testing mushrooms, testing them for edibility. So you can be one of those people. Let's keep heading down the trail to see what other mushrooms might be growing out here. So we got a mushroom growing right here on the side of the trail. I'm gonna pick this so we can have a good look at it. And this is how you truly identify mushrooms, is to pick them. Look at that thing, that's very strange. It's got this greenish color in the gills. How weird is that, right? And the cap is really kind of concaved and sort of funnel shaped. It's depressed here in the center, and it's very orange with kind of ring looking shapes in the pattern of the color here, with all these speckles of green. And then when we flip it over, we see even more green. And this mushroom is another one in the family Lactarius. So these are pretty common this time of year in the order of the Russalales. So these are related to your Russula mushrooms. Lactarius and Russula everywhere on the sides of the trail, really, really common. And when I cut the gills of this, it should lactate a little bit. This one's a little bit too old to be lactating, but normally little driplets of fluid would come out of them. Lactarius deliciosus seem to lactate the least of a lot of the different Lactarius. Lactarius, a big genus of mushrooms, but generally safe to eat. Although you can try the nibble and spit test on these as well to see if they're spicy or if they're mild. And that's a good test of their edibility. But when you have orange and you have those green spots, you can be sure it's in the Lacus Deliciosus group. These don't demand any kind of money on the market, so that would imply that maybe they're not the best of edible mushrooms to find. But nonetheless, with a name like Deliciosus, definitely safe to eat. And if you're making some kind of a soup or a stew, and you want some of that earthy kind of umami fungal flavor in it, you can just get some of these Lactarius pretty easy on the side of the trail and throw them into your soup. And, you know, they're perfectly edible and supposedly good eating. So there you go, Lactarius Deliciosus. Let's keep moving down the trail. This stuff's called Xilia, and when I brush it, it's gonna go poof, and you'll see all the spores. Ready? Isn't that cool? I just let like a million spores go. Look at this beautiful mushroom growing right here on the side of the trail. This one, another one of the porcini clade. This one, Boletus fibrillosus. And it also has reticulation on the stem, just like a Boletus edulis or a porcini, but this one's got this dark velvety cap. Really, really good eating. This one's like picture perfect. Boletus fibrillosus, some people call it the chocolate porcini or the fib king. It's beautiful, so I'm gonna take it with me today after I take some nice photos of it. That's a cool mushroom. Oh, wow. Look at them creamy stuffed pores. Reticulation, just like a porcini, but with a darker cap. Beautiful mushroom. It's really good eating too. Look at this beauty right here. Another fib king. Boletus fibrillosus. Let's pull it up. That's a beauty. Check out what I came across right down here. This is the photographer's dream. These guys, Hypholoma pecii. When they get older, they turn black like this in the center, and they look totally different. Look at that. And you can see a little bit of that red guttation on the corner. But, and then teeth underneath, right? Very cool. Here's one that's actually bleeding a little bit. People try to spend their whole life trying to find one of these to photograph. And this area is actually kind of lousy with them in the autumn. They love to associate with conifer trees. And they're being studied for medicinal purposes. They contain an anticoagulant. Not really edible, they're just really chewy, but they're not toxic. You could lick that stuff off and it's fine. It's just a pigmented guttation. It's just basically water that's coming out of them. Look at these beauties. Hypholoma pecii. The bleeding tooth fungus. This one's really bloody. Just super bloody with this red guttation. These are gorgeous. Look at that. So rain will wash the guttation off, and they actually mature pretty quick, and they'll stop having this guttation, and then they just kind of turn black. All right, we're gonna get this really bloody one. See that? Let's see what this blood tastes like. I've had them before and they were really spicy. It's just a little bit bitter right now, but it definitely tastes like some medicine in there. These aren't toxic, so this is safe. One time a TikTok video was removed from my TikTok. Yes, I do have a TikTok at Mushroom Wonderland with a 0, but wonder with a 0, but they pulled it down saying this was dangerous content, but it's not toxic. So Just kidding. It's fine. Here's an interesting and kind of handsome mushroom growing here on the side of the trail. Wow, look at these. Very thick bad boys. Look at that. Beautiful red stem or stipe. See how red that is? Sometimes that's variable, but this is really important. See how it's a sponge instead of gills? So a totally different type of mushroom in the Boletales, in the bolete group. So these ones used to just be commonly called the Zeller's bolete. But there is a distinction between that one and another one that grows pretty commonly around here, the Xerocamelus atropurpureus. So that's what this one is. Deep purple is what atropurpureus means for the color of this cap. Very rough like that. The Zeller's is a little bit smoother. And it has a light color around the edge of the cap, where this one really doesn't. It's got a little bit of that, but it's kind of where the sponge meets it. Kind of small little differences, but Xerocamelus atropurpureus, these ones are a good edible mushroom. And as I look into here, I see a couple nice little nuggets. These things can be really thick and stout, substantial, beautiful little mushrooms. Look at that. And I see some more nice little buttons popping up all in here. It's starting to get colder out, so it's surprising to see these just starting to flush right now. And I'm going to collect some of these for the dinner table because I personally haven't eaten these, and I think they're just gorgeous. Look at these. These are in perfect shape. So if there was ever some atropurpureus that I wanted to eat and try out, it's going to be these ones. How beautiful. So first I'm going to stage these all like a nice little family. Probably have a couple that appear to be growing right in the same substrate where I found them. Look at this grouping of 3 of them. That's perfect. And then we can lay some of these out here and get some really nice photos. And then I'm going to cut the bases off so I don't get dirt all in my basket, so to speak. And we're going to harvest these and take them home to try them out, give them a taste test. So the Xerocamelus atropurpureus, pretty common mushroom in the autumn here in the Pacific Northwest. Pretty easy to identify. And if you did confuse it for one, it would probably be the Xerocamelus zelleri, which also typically grows in an old growth setting, where these prefer kind of medium growth forest. But a gorgeous mushroom growing right on the side of the trail, mycorrhizal, growing with the trees here. And these are beautiful and totally edible, so what a cool find today. Right here I came across some mushrooms growing on this downed conifer tree, like a young hemlock it looks like. And these are growing in this big group, and they could look a lot like sulfur tufts, but this one has kind of a gray color to the gills. So instead of fluorescent green, these ones are more gray. So this one is known as the conifer tuft or the smoky gill, and it could look a lot like its poisonous relative, Hypholoma fasciculare. But this one's known as Hypholoma capnoides, or the smoky gill. This is a decent edible mushroom, and they're fruiting right now, later in November. They don't mind the cold weather, and they only grow on conifer wood like this, and definitely has kind of a smoky colored gill rather than that fluorescent green colored gill. So these are a decent edible, but not for the beginning forager because they look so much like their poisonous counterpart, the fasciculare. So as I look right here along the side of the trail, very obvious bright orange mushroom. And I'm going to pick this guy from the base so you can see the entire thing. But look at that, it looks just like a flower. This is the Pacific golden chantrell, Cantharellus formosus. How beautiful is that? So this one characterized by an orange cap with orange gills and an orange stem. This one's got a really roughly kind of vase shape, depressed in the center here. And it's got a sweet smell. It's got really heavily decurrent gills. Probably the most popular edible wild mushroom that grows here in the Pacific Northwest because it's really easy to identify. You can pluck them. This one's really clean, but I like to get the pine needles off before I put it in my basket. But Cantharellus formosus, the Pacific golden chantrell, this is what most novice weekend mushroom hunters are after, and they're growing right now in late November, on the side of the trail. So how beautiful. They're still out here for the grabs. Here's another mushroom. These are popping up everywhere right now. I should probably show you this. I'm going to pick this big guy. Look at that. Boom! Big white mushroom. Very vase shaped. The gill's not really decurrent though. So they do, you know, they connect at the base of the stem. But this is the Russa Breva peas. Here's another one coming up right here. And I'm telling you, they're just everywhere. Look at, they collect rainwater like that. And these can get parasitized and turn into lobster mushrooms. These are perfectly edible the way that they are. Russa Breva peas is a commonly picked and used edible mushroom, especially in like Russia. Over here, another big one coming up. They're everywhere right now, and they're huge. But yeah, they use them in Russia and Eastern Europe as a culinary mushroom pretty commonly. But over here, we're just not really into them when they're just like this. But when they get parasitized by Hypomyces lactiflorum, they become the lobster mushroom, which is pretty sought after edible mushroom. So the Russa, again, you can just snap the stipe like chalk, and they can also be pretty fun to throw at a tree and watch them shatter. I just spread millions of spores into the woods, so kind of fun to do that once in a while. Feel free to try it out, but Russa Breva peas growing everywhere right now. There's a bizarre color of mushrooms growing off of this log right here. So these guys, when we pick one, let's flip it over. So this one, Sarcomixa serratina. This is the late fall oyster. Quite bizarre looking, right? And you can see gills forming in there ever so slightly. Almost looks like a sponged mushroom because these are so robust and thick little guys. But some people claim that these are a decent edible. So they grow kind of oyster-like on the side of, you know, this is like a hardwood log, I believe. And here's a nice little cluster of them. If you were to wait maybe a week, they'd be a little bit bigger. But I've also heard they were pretty bitter flavored. I personally have never eaten these, but they are beautiful. Sarcomixa serratina, or the late fall oyster. So here are some examples of much bigger late fall oysters. The Sarcomixa serratina. And look at that coloration. Not very appetizing looking to me. I don't know. Some people might think that looks pretty appetizing, but this one was just laying on the ground. But definitely has gills, and they all kind of stop in a perfect line, unlike Pleurotus. You know, real oyster mushrooms, the gills just keep running down. These all stop at a definite place. So the late fall oyster, Sarcomixa, growing big this year. It's a good year for them. It's been a good year for all mushrooms, really. So not surprised to see these growing so big. Normally I don't find them quite that big. That's a pretty substantial mushroom. Look right over here, some kind of whitish mushrooms that are just growing here on the side of the trail. These might just look like boring any old mushroom to you, but these are actually Matsutake. These are Hypholoma murulanium. These are a very highly sought after edible mushroom when they're young. These ones are way past their prime, and just, you know, most people don't know what they are, so often they'll just be growing right on the side of the trail. I think I see another one right up here that is young and is literally just growing right on the side of the trail. So let me pluck this guy. Yes, very rubbery stem. You see that annulus at the base, and it always tapers down, has this gray sand on the bottom of the stem, and then this kind of tannish coloring. And Matsutake, really highly revered in Japan for their aroma and their flavor. Very flavorful mushrooms. Right here looks like another one coming out, and these two are actually not too old. Look at that. There's one growing out underneath this log. Let's see. Oh, let's get all the way at the bottom. There we go. 2 tricholomas that are worthy of keeping. We got so many mushrooms out here right now. A Lacus Deliciosus that's been kind of squished, and looks like another little baby Russa. Cute. But these ones, Tricholoma myriolanum, these are a decent edible, especially when all the gills are still white and stuff. These ones are not too past their prime. They prefer them, you know, people usually prefer them when they're young and just young buttons, unopened caps, but these ones are fully opened, but still contain a lot of flavor and odor, and are, you know, you could even sell these on the market. You know, if you had a lot of mushrooms, they'd give you a couple dollars a pound for these, because they're still white and fresh and they dry them out. So these are still out there in November here, towards the end of November, but a beautiful mushroom, really, really worth picking, good edible. So look for these characteristics. Gray sand on the base. The base tapers down. There's no bulb, no bulbous base. And then it has this really, really heavy duty annulus here. Well, that's what we call that. These white gills are not attached to the stem. If you look close, there's no attachment there. And, you know, they've got this tannish kind of speckling on the bottom of the stem and on the top of the cap. Oh, and the smell. Yeah, the smell has been described as a mixture between cinnamon red hots and dirty socks. I get the cinnamon part, and it does have kind of a musty, funky smell, so they're not necessarily for everyone, but still beautiful. And definitely, if you're not going to eat them right away, they're great to dry and save for later. So Matsutake or Tricholoma myriolanum. Yeah, we've got all these fruitings of these mushrooms just growing alongside the trail. Super common, kind of a purplish sort of lavender looking gills, and very ruffly when they get old, you know, and they grow in these big groups like this. These are also mycorrhizal mushrooms, and they're just growing everywhere right now. I mean, the forest is just covered with them. Look at, here's some really large ones that you don't typically see them this big. That's a very big Lacaria. So these are Laria Lcot, or commonly called the deceiver. So these are edible. I just recently tried them out and was disappointed. I was really hoping that they would taste better because they're just so common and there's so many of them, but they were just not good flavored. They were definitely fungal, and then they had an extra twist of something else, and the stems were really woody, and they're just a little bit disappointing. But these ones, Laria Lcot, very unique look, very scurfy stem. You see that? Kind of hairy looking, really dry. These ones are everywhere. They're mycorrhizal, and they're just really common and really beautiful. Some of my favorite ones to photograph because of them widely spaced gills. But Laria Lcot, or the deceivers, an edible mushroom you could eat in a pinch, but not really desired. Right down here on the side of the trail, kind of an exciting one to find. A lot of people out hunting for these. These ones are a species of Lactarius. So it gets that name because these gills will actually lactate kind of a milky substance whenever they're damaged. There we go. You can start to see it lactating a little bit of that milky looking substance. And these ones are special because they're known as the candy cap. So they get the smell of maple syrup when they dry, and you can use them to make them into all kinds of confections and stuff. And so these ones are always dry on top, a little bit rough, kind of like an orange peel. They're gonna have this kind of creamy white colored gills and a little bit of like speckling on the stipe of darker color over lighter color. So these are mycorrhizal. I often find them growing in little swales, little mounds like this, or old stumps sometimes. And you cannot smell these when they're fresh in the field. You could use a lighter and you might get a little hint of the maple syrup, but it's really not until you dry them out that they're going to have that really pungent maple syrup smell. And you know, I find that just leaving them on the counter overnight, you know, maybe 2 days on the counter, they'll be crispy dry and they'll smell just like maple syrup, and you can make cookies, you can do French toast. You can do all kinds of things with the Lactarius rubitus, or the candy cap. Beautiful little mushrooms right here. Make sure to go over to mushroom-wonderland.com, get your merch, like the tent in the forest, the cozy cabin, or the original logo design. Thanks for joining this episode of Mushroom Wonderland. Make sure to hit subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one. Much love, everybody.